more. And as you imagine, it's a lot earlier than we're normally here. We normally get here. Normally, it's a late night show, but what we decided to do, we had to have this guest on, so we had to make sure that we had time for him so that we can definitely get a better understanding of UBI. That's been our series lately. Is to talk about the benefits of the UBI program, because, like I said, we always talked about the future being UBI, and we are wanting everyone's perspective. We want to know what UBI is, where from different angles and different perspectives, and that's what we've been trying to do here in the last couple of weeks. So, hope you guys are ready for a good show. We have Carl here, and we got Seth like always. So go ahead, Seth. You take it,
Hi,
man.
hi. I'm Karl Widerquist. I'm I am a professor at Georgetown University's campus in the Middle East in Qatar. Um, I've been there for about 15 years now, um, and I've been writing about basic income since the 20th century. I've written I've written or edited 11 books, and I think about 7 or 8 of those are in some way focused on UBI. Uh, and I've been I publish mostly on the ethics of UBI, but also on the economics of UBI. I'm one of the co-founders of the big conference in UBI, which has changed its name like 3 times, but the conference is still going after more than 20 years. And I'm also a past coordinator, a past co-chair of the Basic Income Earth Network. So as you can see, UBI is a big focus of my work.
Yeah, definitely, and we look forward to asking you more and more questions. Seth, let the people know how you feeling today.
I'm feeling good. Now, I just have a question. How long have you been researching UBI? Are you like the pre Andrew Yang, like you're an OG
Oh,
UBI supporter,
oh,
or
way before that. Uh, I I first published on UBI in 1999. Um, and so I can say I've been doing it since the 20th century. Um, and actually, and I actually started writing on it in 1996. So for any young researchers out there, it took me 3 years of writing about basic income to get my first real publication uh, on it. So it takes a while, but it's doable. And if you go back far enough, I actually became interested in basic income on what was my 15th birthday, February 7th, 1980, when I saw an episode on the guaranteed income by on Milton Friedman's PBS television show. Um, so it was actually a very right-wing person that got me into basic income. It was, but in those days, the rhetoric was very different. And a lot of right-wing people were saying, well, we can't get rid of this welfare state. So let's make it work better. How's it going to work better? Well, something like UBI or its close cousin, the negative income tax, which is now called guaranteed income in the United States. A lot of people were saying on the right were saying make that compromise. And then you got people like Reagan in the UK, Thatcher in the UK, Reagan in the US, Mulrooney in Canada, like triple whammy to this part of the world. And they're like, no, we don't need to make any compromises. Let's just gradually dismantle everything that the welfare state's been doing, and that trend's been going on for 40 years now. And it's an awful trend, but it does. The thing about that trend is that it does open the door to new ideas because at least since the Great Recession started in 2008, 2009, um, people have been the rhetoric on inequality is gone the other way, and there's a movement about inequality and poverty are big problems. We got to do something about it. We haven't maybe made a lot of gains yet with policy, but we made a lot of gains with people. And these people who are out on the who've been out on the streets activating for that, they don't want to rebuild Lyndon Johnson's welfare state. They don't want to just put everything back the way it was before all the cuts we've had over the 40 years. They want new and better ideas. And UBI is a well thought out, well researched policy, ready to face that, ready to fill that niche. And so there's a lot of people turning to UBI. I see a good chance for more momentum for it in the future.
I'm interested in which angle you come from supporting UBI, because you did mention that you had first seen it from Milton Friedman, which, interestingly enough, I used to be a libertarian too, and that kind of was one of my first concessions to entering the idea of the welfare state. Now I mean, I still support UBI, but from a much more progressive standpoint, of course. And I think there's a lot of interesting ways in which you could formulate it that would make it much more effective. Like if it's funded by something like a land value tax, or you could implement a social wealth fund, something like that, to distribute, profits from equity, that kind of thing. So how would you support us funding a UBI, or what would be the source of it? Oh, go ahead.
Well, you asked an enormous question there from what angle do I come into? What's the source of funding? So that's an enormous question. And I was going to say,
I see them as synchronicity to an extent.
They are connected, but they're not as connected for me as they are for a lot of people. So you've got me from right libertarianism to left libertarianism and funding issues all in one question here. So for me, there was a time when I described myself as a libertarian, probably throughout the 80s. But now when I look back, I say I thought I was a libertarian, a right libertarian. I never really was, because I was never that sympathetic to the property owners. I was one of those people that regulations usually favor the property owners. And also that property owners have taken a lot from the people who don't have property in a way that inhibits your freedom. And this needs to be redressed. And the only entity out there that can do that is the government. So very quickly, even though I thought I was a follower of Milton Friedman and other libertarians, I was like, basic income is essential to freedom. Whereas for a lot of these libertarians, basic income or the negative income tax is a compromise to the left. It's a streamlining of the welfare state. There are or a way to fulfill a proviso or something, but they see it as sacrificing the freedom of property owners to support the welfare of the propertyless, and they don't realize, or they refuse to see. It's very easy to not see something you refuse to look at. We get that with racism, but we also, a lot of people never look at racism, so they never see it. And we get the same thing with classism and how we treat less privileged people of all stripes, whether it's religion, race, or class, poverty status. That people won't see it, and libertarians especially want to support property rights. They will not see the way that when you cannot establish private property without interfering with people who don't have property. And I wrote an entire book about this with an anthropologist called The Prehistory of Private Property, showing how the private property system was established by governments around the world, either taking land from indigenous people or taking it from their own local peasants. I can't use this gesture while I'm on this.
I was wondering what that was.
Because it's gonna put up a thumbs up or something. So they're either taking it from their own peasants or from indigenous people, giving it to the most privileged people and creating a private property system. Private property systems do not follow from the mythical locking story of individual appropriation. Almost invariably, the first people to mix their labor with or use land do it as a group, do it collectively, and to establish a privileged property rights system like we have takes government interference. And libertarians just pretend that's not true, and that's why I had to part ways with the so-called libertarians or the better name for them really is propertarians, because they put the property rights of the privileged ahead of freedom every time. And if you've got something somebody else doesn't, defending that is not defending freedom, it's defending privilege. And so that's why I part ways with them. And I think, okay, my voice is cleared up on my side. Okay, so that's the first part of your question. Now, the second part of your question, you were kind of getting into land issues and funding issues. Well, it looks like you're the same place I was when I first left libertarianism. I departed right libertarianism for left libertarianism, which is inspired by people like Thomas Paine in the 1700s, Henry George in the 1800s, and some of the best left libertarians of the late 20th and early 21st century. So people like Ian McLean, Michael Otsuka, my very favorite, and also Hillel Steiner. Now, and Michael Otsuka, my very favorite, because he begins to depart from this. Because what left libertarians realize is that observation that I just said, is that you cannot promote freedom and just then promote this fantasy private property privilege system we have. You want to promote freedom, you got to promote everybody's access to the resources that this world survives. So for imagine, will you be made unfree if somebody sucked all the air out of the room you're in right now and said, okay, you can buy this air back from me. You buy this air back from me if you get a job working for me. Does that enhance your freedom, or does that interfere with you in a way that makes you really significantly unfree? Of course it makes you unfree. Well, when they did that with the air, they haven't done that with the air yet. They're working on doing that with the water. They've largely done that in a lot of places. They did that with a land gradually over the last several centuries. And it has made people unfree because it's not enough to work to make your living anymore. You can't just go and work and make your living, because the resources belong to someone. So you have to work for someone who has more resources than you do. It is the only way to keep yourself alive. They're interfering with you by saying, here's the earth, and we're going to interfere with any use you make of it until you do what we say, we the property owners. You cannot get property without benefiting people who already own property, and all property is made in part out of resources. Now, I think any left libertarian would agree with that. Any follower of Thomas Paine, Henry George, Hillel Steiner, Ian McLean, I'm not even sure. I think it's pronounced McLean. Anyway, and there are a lot of others. Any left libertarian would agree with what I've said so far. But then they say, okay, then what do you deserve? The fact that the resources have been taken, then what do you deserve instead? That the privileged people have taken the resources. And what Thomas Paine said and Henry George kind of elaborated on is a ground rent, is that people should pay, anybody who owns land or the stuff we make out of it should pay a rent equal to the value of that land. And what you deserve as being someone who doesn't own land or doesn't own all of gold or our computers that have all these valuable lithium and other things in them. What you deserve, they say, is the dollar value of the world's resources divided by the number of people. So every time a person dies or a person is born, the amount you deserve goes up or down. And I don't think that's it, because that might be enough for giving you what's most important. What's most important is what our ancestors got from direct access to land. And that is the ability to keep themselves alive without working for anyone else. This is why at that meeting with General Sherman in Charleston, South Carolina, when he was announcing the Emancipation Proclamation, he asked a large gathering of freedmen. Unfortunately, they didn't invite freed women, but he asked a large gathering of freedmen, "What do you need to secure your freedom?" And they said, their spokesman said, "We need land to be able to till it and toil it with our own money." And with our own money, with our own efforts, so we don't become dependent on working for our former slave owners. Now, this has become symbolic of broken promises, because Sherman did start distributing land, and it's, of course, well known that then the federal government intervened and took all that land back. It's symptomatic of broken promises, but it's known for that, but as a broken promise. But what it should be known for is what people who understand slavery demand when they demand freedom. It's not enough that I'm not in chains. To really secure my freedom, I have to have access to enough resources that I don't have to go and work for the man anymore. And if you can't give that, as I don't think we can realistically, you can't give everybody in New York City 40 acres and a mule. If you did, it'd cost trillions of dollars. But what you can give them is a basic income high enough to live on. So my argument about what you deserve from the fact that you got to interfere with everybody if you're going to create a private property system is anybody who doesn't have property has to have a basic income large enough to live on. And that's got nothing to do with that is the minimum, no matter what the price of resources. I don't care if the price of resources would entitle you to half as much as you need to live on. You are entitled to that because that's what you have if we never privatized resources. That's what you need to secure your freedom as an individual. So that's why I'm not necessarily, and that means dipping into things other than land rent, then I'm all for it. I mean, I do think that land, resource, and rent taxes are the best taxes. And if that raises more than enough to secure basic income, I'm all for it. But if it's not enough to secure basic income, we are still an unjust society if we don't find some way to raise the revenue we need to have a basic income that's high enough that everybody can live on without being forced by the leverage of the interference that property owners do with resources to go and work for that group of property owners.
I definitely agree with pretty much everything you said there. I don't think that being the first person to occupy land guarantees that your family for generations upon generations become the richest people in society because of the fact that you were the first ones to, fight off the Native Americans or something like that. That doesn't make logical sense.
Yeah. What about them? And and most of that Lockean argument was based on farming. But but yet they used that as a reason to take land from Native Americans, despite the fact that the vast majority of Native Americans were farmers. There were some that did not farm at all, but most of them were farmers. And they would say, well, you only get land when you've transformed it with your labor, and transform it with your labor the way a farmer or a miner or a house builder does. And they say the Indians, except for little villages, never transformed their labor. The rest was hunting grounds. Well, my friend Lance, who from rural Michigan, where I grew up, my friend Lance, he owned a farm and he owned his own hunting ground. What? So our laws should be that anybody can just go and take Lance's hunting ground away and start farming it or build a factory on it without Lance's permission. And
as long as they're productive,
kill him. That's what Lockeanism, would. Well, I've written an awful lot attacking Lockeanism, so I could talk for hours on that, but we might want to move on.
Well, I mean,
I think the relationship between the property owners and people that are just born later and so are not bestowed property, it's kind of like the key of all relationships in economics and politics. fundamental level.
Right.
And the fact that that is not considered in libertarianism as like something that's standing between your access to freedom or your equal access to property and opportunity is clearly an you need some sort of action to mitigate this inequality that was already exists in the past. Otherwise, it's going to keep perpetuating itself.
Yeah, okay. Well, to stick with Lockeanism just a little bit, I shouldn't even call it Lockeanism. I should call it right libertarianism, propertarianism, because some propertarians object to Locke, but they don't. What they don't object to is appropriation theory. The idea that if you're the first one to go and go and you're the first one to get the land, then you get to keep it forever. And your children, or whoever you sell it to gets to keep it forever. And some of them will object to Locke's whole theory of that, but they all have some kind of appropriation theory. And I've attacked this both. I've attacked the principle itself, saying this is a bad principle, but also I've attacked it from an internal perspective. That even if you agree, even if you say, yes, the first appropriator gets the land, and they have all different reasons why. For Locke, it was first use. For a guy named Israel Kirzner, it was discovery. For others, it was first. For Jan Narveson, it's first claim. For first use, first discovery, first claim. And various other, those are the popular ones, but various others of what you have to do to say this land is mine and not yours. Basically the first come, first serve principle or something like that. But I've attacked that principle that you can even appropriate. But I've also in an article called A Dilemma for Libertarianism and in a book called The Prehistory of Private Property, I've said, okay, let's accept the principle. Let's accept the principle that the first person who uses or transforms land with their labor or claims land or discovers land, whichever principle it is, if that principle is the way we create, is the right, moral, just way to create property, would we get a private property system like right libertarians or propertarians want, and similar to what we have, except for with it we tax and redistribute it? Would it lead to that? And if you look at history, absolutely it will not. Because the first people, almost, except for in some really extremely rare places like islands that weren't discovered until the 1800s. I mean, literally weren't discovered. No native population. They were uninhabited till the 17 or 1800s. You don't get that anywhere. The first people to discover, to mix their labor with land, to use land, to claim land, the first people to do any of those things were almost invariably tribes of people who shared the land and said, just by being a member of this tribe, you get access to the land. And that is true whether they're fishers, farmers, or hunter-gatherers. And in some cases, such as places like the Kalahari Desert and the Arctic, very often they didn't even limit that right to their own tribe. You go to the Arctic, before they entered hunting and gathering up there, and you ask a native person, "This is your land. Can I hunt and gather on it?" They're like, "This isn't my land. That's the Arctic. Man, if you want to go, if you think you can go and find a seal out there, have at it." And there's no limit to how many seals there are. There's a limit to how much time you got to go and find one. So you just have at it. I don't care where you're from. I don't care if you just got here from Beijing. You can go and hunt and gather there, and we're not going to stop you. Same in the Kalahari.
I feel like what you just said goes and shows the proof that property rights are inherent to government, not inherent to human societies. If any sort of society existed without government, they would have no way to enforce these property rights, especially regarding land use. This only existed with monarchy when they had militaries to enforce these rules. There's no other society that could ever enforce it. Therefore, how could it be inherent if you needed government to enforce it?
Yeah,
You needed much more. Oh, go ahead.
And that's exactly true. And it's great that you brought up monarchy, because really what propertarianism is, or libertarianism, or right libertarian, whatever you want to call it, it's really a revolt of the lords. The monarch came along, created this private property rights system in order to reward his lords. And then the lords' great-great-grandchildren forget that the only reason they have these wonderful estates is because the king conquered the land from the peasants and gave it to them. They say, I'm tired of the king taxing me. I'm the real owner. Real owner. Let's get rid of this king and just have the lords run the country. That's propertarianism, and it is oppressive to other people. Now at this point,
it's just bringing back feudalism and imperialism.
There's really a lot of feudalism in so-called right libertarianism. It's about the privileges of the lords, and they're still called landlords when we know where that came from. Exactly. They were lords appointed by the king. But now at this point, people say, "Oh, you're against private property. What are you, a communist?" Well, neither is it. There's a million alternatives. There's a million kinds of capitalism, and there's a million alternatives. This simplistic idea that there are only two kinds of societies, communist and capitalist, and there's just a continuum in between, is utter nonsense. That both communists and capitalists are perfectly happy that we all agree. Oh, you don't like capitalism? Oh, you got to be a communist then. Both sides want to say that because it helps them recruit people. And it's incredibly false. There are millions and millions of different ways we could organize a society that you could throw whatever label you want on them. They're not like the ideals that either of those sides gives up. Now, so being critical of the private property rights system doesn't make you a communist, and being critical of the private property system as it's constituted doesn't mean you're against all private property. I'm fine with having private property. As a matter of fact, I own some right now, like these headphones I'm wearing. Those are private property. Every time I take a shower, I don't want some guy off the street coming in. No private property. Let me share your shower. No, I'm against that. Those are forms of private property. But what I'm critical of is a privileged private property system where the people who own believe that they don't owe anything back to the people who don't own. Yeah. If you want to take something out of the common resources that don't belong to anybody, then you got to do at least two. You got to do something to make it beneficial to the people you're interfering with by putting them under the duty of respecting your property rights. You got to do that, but also you've got to then respect the rules they make. They can say, okay, we're going to let you have this land down by the river, but you can't pollute the river. That's environmental regulation. There's nothing interfering with the inherent right of the property rights owner to have environmental regulations or other kinds of regulations. Just as we, the community, who is giving you this privilege of getting this land that no one else will then be able to use because it's now yours. These are the rules on which we're giving it to you. Yeah. I hope I'm not getting a little too philosophical for the audience here. These questions have led me into led me into the stuff that I do my most heavy duty ethics on.
No, it's very great illustrations. It's kind of putting, I guess, realism in UBI, because a lot of times these ideas can be very idealistic, and most people can't see the practicality of it. Yeah. And I kind of love the fact that you use visualizations and illustrations to kind of illustrate how UBI can actually have an impact right now in your life, which I think is amazing. One of the things that you talked about earlier was this difference between negative income tax versus UBI. So this negative income tax, explain to us the history behind that versus the UBI, and how come that seems to be kind of which one's more popular and which side you see more likely trying to pass?
Yeah, these are two very closely related policies. Both of them are ways to create an income floor. What I most want is an income floor that's high enough for people to live on. And if I can't get that, I'd like an income floor that's at least higher than it is now, because the big problem we have in the world today is economic inequality, and anything that's getting more money and therefore more power into the hands of the least privileged, pretty much, well, not anything, but pretty much anything that's going to do that. Certainly anything along the lines of an income floor, even if it's not enough to live on, that which is what you need to give you real power in market interactions. Any kind of income floor, I favor. Any movement in that direction, I favor. But there are two ways to create a floor under everybody's income. One is to give an income to everybody, regardless of what they make privately. And then we're going to tax your private income in order to do what mainstream economists call financing basic income, or what some post-Keynesian economists call counteracting the inflationary effects of basic income, whatever you call it. That's why you gotta have some taxes when you have basic income. Basic income, you get it rich or poor. Mm-hmm. You get it rich or poor. Just as you make money, you pay taxes, so things are going to even out. So what actually happens with basic income? It's not that everybody's income goes up. You give everybody the basic income, but you raise income or property taxes or land taxes or other kinds of taxes in a way that is progressive. So the higher your income is, then the more taxes you pay. And after a certain point, you're going to be paying more in taxes than you're receiving in basic income. The real cost of that basic income is how much are you reducing the income of the net contributors, and how much are you increasing the income of the net recipients? That's basic income. That's how you understand its cost. Now, some people, there's another way to do it, though. Some people say, well, why both tax and give somebody a dividend at the same time? Why don't you just give only the full dividend to somebody who makes no income? And then every time they make $1, you take back, say, you reduce the amount you give them by 30%, 50%, whatever the amount is, until it gets to the break-even point, and only then do you start taxing their income. Those are the two models. Now, one of those is called basic income. The first one, where you give it to everybody, that's basic income. The second one, used to, in the 60s, that was well known as negative income tax. And guaranteed income was usually used to mean both of those or something like that. Now, now when we started the U.S. Basic Income Guarantee Network in 1999, we put that guarantee on the end of basic income because we wanted to use BIG, Basic Income Guarantee, as a branch term for both basic income and negative income tax. During this time, there's been a worldwide movement for basic income. And there's been a lot of great work on it, a lot of great activism for it, and basic income has become a very popular term around the world, whereas negative income tax has become less popular since the 1970s under that name. And now people who like the negative income tax don't like that name because it's associated with a very ungenerous program that was supported by Milton Friedman. A lot of very progressive people supported negative income tax back then, but Friedman's the one they remember, so they're running away from that term. And a lot of those people then have been taking the term basic income for this policy, which creates a lot of confusion. This is not happening in the United States. In the United States, they're not kind of broken off into two groups. There's basic income supporters that are talking about you give it to everybody, rich or poor, and then there's guaranteed income supporters who are talking about you give only the full grant to people who make nothing, and then you taper it off as it goes up. But in Canada, a lot of people who really support negative income tax but are ashamed of that name have been calling their program basic income, not only causing confusion, but then marginalizing the people who support a genuine basic income when they could. And there are some people in Canada that have been making inroads to then, okay, let's call it guaranteed income, like they're doing in the United States, or let's call it guaranteed basic income to keep that association with the basic income movement. But also in Germany, this problem is happening. negative income tax is only marginally different from basic income. I'd be really happy if we created it. What I'm not happy about is people trying to marginalize supporters of a genuine basic income by using that name for what's really a guaranteed income. And so that's it. Now, what I haven't told you is, why do I like one better than another? Well, the usual reason people give to support negative income, it's doing that thing again. The usual reason people give to support negative income tax is that it's cheaper. It is not cheaper. There's plenty of mathematics to show that the net cost of the two programs is exactly the same. You introduce it's exactly the same if they're otherwise structured the same. If you introduce a negative income tax with a take-back rate that is the same as the income tax rate with your basic income, the number of net beneficiaries and the number of net contributors will be exactly the same under the two programs, and the amount that each net contributor pays will be exactly the same under each program. The amount that each net beneficiary benefits will be exactly the same under the two programs. They have the same effects if they're structured the same way. You can, of course, have a very ungenerous version of one and a generous version of another. They have the same effects, including the cost. So if they have the same effects, which one works better in practice? If each of them works properly, basic income works better for several reasons. One is for a solidarity reason. There's an old saying in social policy: benefits exclusively for the poor become exclusively poor benefits. If it's only going to those people, I've never had it in my life, I've got so much money, I don't see my kids getting it, I think I'm gonna begin to believe that those people who get it are bad, and I'm gonna vilify them in the public sphere. Negative income tax is vulnerable to that, as basic income is not. Social Security is given to everyone, rich or poor, and it's loved by people across the spectrum in the United States because it has this aspect. Warren Buffett, one of the richest people in the United States, gets a Social Security check every month. And that, because people benefit from it, even if they're net contributors, they see, oh, somebody could tell them, we're going to cancel your Social Security, but we're going to lower your taxes even more than Social Security. Those people are like, well, I don't know. I know if I agree to that, I know you're going to cut my Social Security, but are you really going to cut my taxes? You give them a reason to be solidarity. You give them a reason to say, you got your you low-income person, you have your Social Security, I have mine, a reason for solidarity. But also, it seems like the guaranteed income would work better, because why pay someone and tax them at the same time? Why give them money and tax them when you could just give them if they need it and tax them only if they can afford to pay? The reason for that is that that might be easier for some people, but it is harder for the people who need it most. Who needs their guaranteed income most? I'll tell you who needs it most. A mother with 3 children who just found out that her husband, who has high income, and she's been out of the labor market for 10 years raising kids. She just found out that her husband is abusing her children. She's ran from her husband. She has gone into a woman's shelter, or trying to find one that has spare beds. She needs basic income this second. If properly structured basic income program, she has her own bank account, and the basic income program has been going into that account exclusively for her, and as primary caretaker of the children for them too. It's been going to them all that time. She doesn't have to make a phone call. The money is there. With the negative income tax, she's part of a household where there's a high income earner there's a high income for the family. She's got to go to them and say, my income is suddenly, she's got to go and make a phone call. The night that she runs away from her abusive husband, she has to make a phone call and say, will you, I'm sorry, I just had to leave my husband. Can you please activate my guaranteed income. And they say, well, can you prove that you left your husband? That's women who just checked into a homeless shelter or just got rejected by a homeless shelter, by a homeless shelter, and need to get a motel. They don't need to be. They don't need to be proving that they just ran away from their abusive husband. And the same is true for somebody who has a sudden loss of income, somebody who's suddenly unemployed or had to run from an abusive employer. All of these reasons mean that it is better for low-income people if we have a basic income. And that's why I say the basic income model is better.
It also, a basic income helps mobilize people to get jobs and work more than a negative income tax, because that could disincentivize people from wanting to earn more if it's going to be guaranteed money anyways. That's the conservative argument, that they're actually afraid of like welfare systems immobilizing people or something like that. A universal basic income couldn't do that because the money is there guaranteed. So it's
sorry, are you not finished? Sorry.
No, go ahead. Say what you're saying.
Okay. Because a lot of economists would object to what you're saying, because if they're structured exactly the same, the incentives are also the same. Because if you've got a negative income tax, you get a job, you're going to lose part of your basic income. If you got a basic income and you get a job, you're not going to lose part of your basic income, but the taxes on the job you get are going to be higher than you would get if you had a negative income tax. And those taxes are going to equal to exactly the same as the taxes you would be paying. Now, so economists then say people are rational and they always make decisions on the marginal value of effort versus income. But now, so whether what the economists say on that is true depends how much people actually behave in these very, very idiosyncratic idea of rationality that economists have. And I'm not sure, I've not studied whether people actually would behave differently under a basic income than under a negative income tax. That would actually be a very interesting topic for a study. I don't know of any study along those lines. But there is something else about this, something else related to the kind of thing you're talking about, that is really important for a basic income, which is for the basic income versus the guaranteed income model, which is if in order for the government to give you your payment every month or every week or every day, with a basic income, you could give people that payment continuously, like every second or every fraction of a second, you're getting a tiny portion of your basic income. So the money's always coming in. With a negative income tax, in order for the government to do that, to give you regular payments, they have to know exactly how much money did you make this week. Well, what if you have 3 jobs? What do you have 3 jobs? How is the government going to keep track of what you made in this amount of time to give you the exact right negative income tax that you deserve this month? And I'm giving a whole month here and do it right away. That's really hard to do. But with basic income plus withholdings, that's easy to do. Now, and that's easy. And the thing is, I think one of the things that makes people prefer guaranteed income is upper class perspective. If you are on the net payer side, you say, okay, to know exactly what the government owes me, they got to know exactly what I made. Well, we can figure that out. My accountant can figure that out in my taxes at the end of the year. Well, that's great for you who are at the high end, but people at the low end don't have accountants, don't do their taxes other than an EZ form. And sometimes if it's low enough, they're not even required to do that. People at the low end, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to put that responsibility on people at the low end and say, you've got to tell the government what they owe you every month, and you got to report all your pay stubs to verify this. And if you do it wrong and get too much money, you're going to pay a big penalty at the end of the year, if not go to jail for fraud. Negative income tax has these problems, and guaranteed income, guaranteed basic income, it has all these problems that specifically affect low-income people. that are
Or
absent
no
from basic
income people. That's
or
another thing.
again, middle income people as well, or
No, I said
anybody.
no
And
income.
it's funny. Oh, no one. Oh, of course. Well,
Yeah.
that's
So
just a
you,
special
if you don't
case of
file
low
your
income
taxes,
people. Yeah.
you don't file taxes, then how
Yeah.
are they going to be able to give you a negative
Mhm.
income tax?
Yeah. And I hate to use the term low income people because it makes it sound like there's us normal people and then there's those low income people. And that's really not what history is like. It is that people become low income people for parts of their lives and get out of it. And while you're in it, it's horrible. But when you get out of it, it's better. Although it depends on your situation. I was from a privileged background. When I had low income, it wasn't that horrible because I knew I had a cushion. If I needed dental surgery, I'd go to mom and dad and say, pay for this dental surgery. I was poor on paper, but I had a cushion. But if you don't have that cushion, those acute times are really bad. Now, there are people that are poor throughout their lives. But for the most part, you got people going in and out. So it's not just that most of us, or it's not just that most of us are middle and above, and there's those few low income people. Is that most of us, a very substantial majority of people, have periods of being low income throughout their lives, and even if they're net payers on average throughout their life, those people are going to benefit from the basic, even if they're net payers on average throughout their life. They're being net contributors when they need it. Will make it so they benefit from the policy. Okay, there've been these questions coming in, but they've always come in. Oh, okay. Okay, so the questions have always been heretofore while I'm in the middle of saying something else. So I don't even really have time to read it. But this one, somebody just asked, is there such a thing as a poverty trap? Oh, absolutely, there's such a thing as a poverty trap. That is one good thing about both basic income and the negative income tax. They get rid of the poverty trap. They all put you in a position where you don't have to work. If you don't, basic income and guaranteed income put you in the position where you got this floor. You do not, if it's high enough to live on, you do not have to work if you don't want to. But if you work, if you make any kind of money privately, whether it's working or investing, getting inheritance, you are always better off. You're always better off financially earning more, getting more private income. You're not trapped in poverty because you don't lose anything. You pay some taxes or have your benefits reduced, but with a negative income tax, your benefits are always reduced less than your taxes increase. And our system does not work that way at all. Our system is designed to have this test of, do you deserve it or do you not deserve it? We want people that we judge to be non-deserving as living on the street, eating out of other people's garbage cans. Now, I don't think anybody deserves that. But a lot of people will claim that there are people that don't deserve housing. They've been bad enough in their life not to deserve housing. Criminals deserve housing. We have prisons. At least they get a roof over their head and 3 meals a day.
Exactly.
But yeah, even the worst, but being poor is supposedly a worse crime than that in some ways. And you don't get confined, but you get this instead, which is in a lot of ways worse. So, and there have been people who prefer jail to eating other people's garbage and living on the street. There are people who would intentionally commit crimes to go to jail to get out of homelessness. But the system we have, it's designed to separate these undeserving from the deserving. For the people who don't deserve redistribution, who don't deserve workouts, can you? And of course, what we decide means you're deserving. Well, will you work? If you can, will you work for people who have more than you? Somehow, being poor means you owe money to people who have privileges. You owe your labor to people who have privileges. They don't owe you squat if you're undeserving. So you go work for them, and then maybe we'll have, if you work for them, then maybe we'll have a minimum wage to sure you get amount, and maybe we'll have some labor market regulations for you, maybe some housing policies for you if you work for them. But if you judge you can't work, then we're going to give you, you might or might not, if you can't work for them, depending on how you do this increasingly arcane and complex application system. When you work for them, we will give you food, or when you prove you can't, we give you food stamps, or we will give you disability, or we'll give you public housing, or we'll give you a whole bunch of other small benefits that might add up to enough to live on. And if they add up to enough to live on, then you get offered a minimum wage job, you find you lose all of this stuff to take the job. And you end up being actually worse off. So that, what economists call that, is an effective tax rate of over 100%. That is a poverty trap. You're actually better off living off benefits than taking a job. And to the extent that which you have poor people that will not work, that's usually the reason, the poverty trap. The poverty trap is very reason, and it is very real. A lot of people are living in it right now. And if we went to the Social Security model, that both negative income tax or basic income, the two forms of guaranteed income, both of those things get rid of that poverty trap.
No. That's awesome. Now,
yeah.
What about?
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sir. No, go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was going to say there's one aspect of the basic income that also, would raise prices or raise wages for people across industry, because the coercive trap of deprivation, of starvation, living on the streets would lead people to accept whatever they can get, because it's when your market value, when you just got out of jail, or you, whatever reason it is, you have no market value and can't get a high paying job, you kind of take what you can get to not.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Starve.
That's again, that goes back to Garrison Fraser. I think Garrison Fraser is he was the spokesman for that meeting with General Sherman of the Freedmen. Garrison Fraser should be way more famous than he is. He's a little known person in the history of the struggle for equal rights in America. But he's the guy who demanded 40 acres and a mule. And Garrison Fraser knew, and he did it for the exact reason you're talking about. Thomas Paine talked about the same reason. I'm reading a guy in 1923 who was saying that in the Political Science Quarterly. I'm reading, right, his name I think is Richard Hale. I'm like, oh wow, reading this article from 1923 sounds like something I wrote. Bertrand Russell said, a lot of people have noticed this. And that's why I say you need basic income to make you free. Unless we live in a world where there's land for everybody to get 40 acres and a mule without leaving their home. You're not going to do that in Tokyo or New York. But anyway, and that's one of the most important things. If you got a basic income high enough to live on, you get really important effects. You get something that the right wing is so against that they really vilify it. But it's actually a great thing. You get people working less. So initially, you got people right now working at low wages. You introduce a basic income, the wages stay the same, but people work less. Then employers are like, wow, I got no workers. What do I do? Well, I'm going to have to pay more if I'm going to get workers. So they bid the wages back up. And some of those people work. So you go from a lot of people working at low wages to fewer people working at these low wages to better wages and all the crap jobs. That's what's one of the most important things that basic income can do. And that's exactly what Garrison Fraser was asking for when he demanded 40 acres and a mule.
And also, like, the reduction of the amount of shifts available, people working less hours in certain industries, like maybe the service industry. If there's less servers, or they're working less hours, then there's more servers, there's more jobs. So there's more opportunities for different kinds of people instead of and we are already moving to an area in society where jobs are reducing. We're losing the need for them because of automation, stuff like that. So, having people work less hours at one job, if somebody has to work like one shift a week at one place or do different things, and they can explore different areas of their own personal interests, things that could make them money, not necessarily enslaved to a corporation just for survival reasons. You could earn money in stuff in ways that are interesting to you. and that's the
Yeah.
future. But you can actually explore your own anything that you want to do in life. You could do that, and you could do it without the fear of this is going to impoverish me if I follow my ambitions.
Exactly. Yeah. And the so many people have done wonderful creative things. When they were the guy who created the Linux operating system was living off long-term unemployment insurance in Finland. When he created that, J.K. Rowling, whether you like her or not, a lot of people like J.K. Rowling's books. She started those books when she was living off of social benefits in the UK. And what we're doing, I hate to quote Tony Robbins but there's one thing that Tony Robbins says that is really, really true, is that we spend so much time. Okay, I can't remember this quote exactly right, but we're so fixated on making a living that we're unable to plan our lives. Mm-hmm. That's an argument for basic income right there. And that's one of the reasons that this so-called land of opportunity we live in has one of the worst cases of economic immobility in the industrialized world. Is that if you are born rich, you are more likely to die rich in the United States than most other well-developed, wealthy countries. And if you're born poor, you're more likely to die poor in the United States in most other well-developed countries because we put low-income people in a position where they can't afford to train themselves, they can't afford to follow their bliss and stuff like that. And I've been able to do those kind of things. It's led me to the point where I've been able to publish books and make things that employers and other people like. And I couldn't have done that if I was every day had to go and wash dishes like I did when I had low income. I had to go in every day and wash dishes and then go home and sleep. And that's what we do to most of the world's human beings.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
And it all comes from the side of conservatism that believes that you are a product of your output essentially, and if you don't contribute to society and you end up starving, then that is the lesson and that you are showing the rest of the world, and that's what you deserve based on what you contribute. And I think that is just a flawed way of looking at things, because people would obviously not be motivated by a starvation. That's not going to make somebody a super productive member of society automatically, because everybody does not want to starve. So if that were already true, if the fear of starvation or homelessness is going to keep people from being unproductive, well then why isn't that not worked at this point? Because
the threat of homelessness hangs over the head not of only people at the bottom, but anybody who's not independently wealthy. If you're not, and that's a huge section of the I don't know if it's the entire 99%, but a huge section of most people throughout their working lives. If I do not keep working for somebody who can afford to employ me, I am going to be on the street. That gives us all too much work incentive. Except now there's a poverty trap. That's the wrong kind of work disincentive. But other than people in the poverty trap, we have way too much work incentive for people today. And that's why we get low wages and low productivity. When you put a person in a position where I'm going to be homeless or I'm going to take whatever crap job I can get, you get a lot of people going into these crap jobs, getting crap benefits, crap working conditions, crap wages, and crap chance of moving up in the company. When you get that situation, what you get is people taking those crap jobs. They got to take those crap jobs, but doing them really resentfully. And doing really resentfully, working slow when the boss isn't around, being really unproductive. That's how you pay back those people that have treated you bad. We need an economy that is look, we're all stuck here together, like Rodney King said. It was some of the things that people ridiculed his speech for being trite, but what he said about we're all stuck here together was really good. That is That's what society is. It's not a shared thing. It's not, we haven't, no one successfully made society into a shared thing. It's a bunch of people are stuck here together. You got to learn how to get along. And if we do it by saying, well, you do what the privileged people say in order to prove your worth, that is not going to create a society that is for everyone, where everyone, we need the privileged need to discipline ourselves by saying, we're not going to force low-income people to do anything. What we're going to do, instead of forcing low-income people to do stuff, is we're going to discipline ourselves so that they get enough to live on, not a huge amount, but enough to live on. And then if we want them to help the rest of us, we're going to say, okay, what does it take now that we're not starving you to death to get you to do this? What's it going to take to really get you to want to contribute? Yeah. That's a discipline that the upper class has almost never taught. And that's how we need to discipline the privileged among us.
Perfect. Wow, this is a great conversation. It's like never knew an hour went by that fast.
Yeah, that was a quick hour. Sorry that I spent like 10 minutes answering every question. I have a bad tendency to do that.
Don't apologize. I mean, like I said earlier, I think that your illustrations really kind of drive home a picture of how UBI can be helpful for many people. So I definitely enjoyed the elaborations of the idea. I have some rapid fire questions for you because I know we're after an hour, and I know we promised you only an hour, but I kind of wrote these down, and I was kind of like, let me ask these and get these out of the way. So with an incentivized program such as UBI, you have this issue of sometimes the price gouging that most big businesses would do when they realize that lower income people may have extra money lying around. Is there anything in UBI that talks about combating those price gouges? For example, like, I don't know, your cell phone company decides to raise your bill $5, or your electric company decides to raise it by $10 because they know you have extra disposable income.
Yeah. Well, first thing you got to remember that basic income doesn't financially benefit everyone. You got net recipients and net contributors. The net contributors have less money to spend. The net beneficiaries have more money to spend. Only in situations where people are selling exclusively to the net beneficiaries do they have an incentive to raise prices. And so let's use an example of rent. It does give them an incentive to raise rent in low-income neighborhoods. But it also gives them a reason to lower rent in high-income neighborhoods, which has one bad effect. The very people we want to help are paying higher rent. But it has another good effect. There's less inequality in housing. You're more competitive to get the housing more similar to people higher up the spectrum than you are. And there are other things we can do. There are a lot of problems in our housing market that make it make housing so expensive for people that aren't super wealthy. There's a lot of things we can do to fix those problems. If we fix those problems, which includes counterintuitive and taxing land, but a lot of other things we can do. It's rapid fire questions, so I got to keep it short. But a lot of things, we fix those problems. Along with it, you're going to find that we can protect people from the price gouging without causing inflation. With things like that, and we're going to have greater equality in what people consume and where they live.
Okay. Let's see here. And so you talked briefly about UBI being a universal program. Now, do you believe that children should get a separate stipend?
Well, yes, but children under a certain age can't take care of themselves. You're not going to give cash to a 1-year-old. You're going to give that to their primary caretaker, and that is that identifying the primary caretaker is sometimes a problem because because very often the financially one of the parents is financially dependent on the other one, and the one that is financially independent is also has the means to siphon this off to theirs. That happens a lot, but it's a continual problem that we have that problem already, and we're doing things to try to combat it. But also you can have the problem, well, what if both parents are neglectful? And then some people have proposed ridiculous things to give it. What if both parents are neglectful? First of all, it is really rare where kids have two neglectful parents. It happens, but it's rare. And so what they want to do is that they'll say, well, let's just have no basic income for children and we'll put it in a bank and then we'll give it to them when they turn 21. And that way their parents can't steal it. Well, that is in order to target these few kids where both parents are neglectful. You are making all kids poor. A horrible, horrible idea, because growing up poverty, especially in very deep poverty, if you grow up in deep poverty, there is no amount of money we can give you as an adult that will make up for that. That will scar you in ways for life. It will give you post-traumatic stress that you can't buy your way out of post-traumatic stress at 21. It is, if you have two neglectful parents or a single parent who is neglectful, it is better, you're better off the wealthier, the higher income that single parent is. That's just simply the way it is. It's a rich or poor or good. It's good to have money. Neglectful or not neglectful, it's good to have parents that have more money. That's the truth of being a kid. Now, if they're neglectful enough, we have child protective services that will intervene. You know, if you want to. There are good ways and bad ways that child protective services intervene. If you want to fund that better along with basic income, we can reduce this problem even further. If you make it so child protective services, there's a lot of problems with it. Usually for higher income people, their thing is let's fix the problem, and for lower income people, their thing is let's take the kids away from the parents. That's a horrible way to do it. It always has to be focusing on let's identify the problem and fix it. And unless the parent is obviously abusive, you do not take the kid away, especially if the kid doesn't want to be taken.
Awesome. Well, Carl, that was all my rapid fire questions.
All right.
Awesome.
That was the closest thing I'm able to do to a rapid fire answer. I don't think in sound bites, so it's really hard for me to speak in sound bites.
Yeah. No. We really appreciate your details.
Yeah.
Seth, you have any final questions?
Yeah, I just think it's really good. Sorry. I just have I said it's a really good converse between the conversation about UBI we had like 2 weeks ago with Scott Santens, because his was very policy focused and very, this number goes up and this leads to this and this kind of thrive in this area. And this from a philosophical perspective is probably more important, because at a fundamental level, we need to convince people from an emotional level to support UBI. The thing from a lot of ways, the financial aspect of it is concerning. That's dissuading people from supporting it, which is another good explanation. That's necessary as well. Yeah. But from an emotional perspective, just the fact that we just allow people to fall through the cracks and they're just done with their life and they just live until they die in the streets, and they don't have any sort of way or any sort of resource to get them out of that situation. It doesn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit the government, society, taxpayers. It doesn't benefit anybody on the planet. The idea that imprisoning somebody and spending what does it cost? $56,000 a year to incarcerate somebody. The idea that $1,000 a month, $12,000 per person is a worse investment than just, it's so much cheaper to just give people the resources they need to become a contributing member of society. And just if you're going straight off of efficiency, that's another way straight to it. So
I agree. But no, I don't have anything further to add. It's interesting that we didn't, although Scott and I agree on almost everything, and there are a few things we disagree on. None of that stuff came up today, but maybe sometime you get us both on and try to get us to what do you most agree on and what do you most disagree on.
That's awesome. That would be a great show. Yeah. That would be a great show. Well, Carl, I'll let you have the final word here, and just let us know. You said 12 bucks, so I'm assuming there's a place to purchase them. If you can let us know where to purchase, your Twitter handle, and so people can find out more information.
Oh,
We'll
the
put
new
that
book.
on the
Oh,
description.
I should have the new book handy so I can hold it up and show people.
Yes.
It's called. Unfortunately, I haven't done that, but it's simply called Universal Basic Income. It's on the Essential Knowledge series of MIT Press. And that's it's distributed by Random House. So, and I got like first time in my life, I got a decent royalty check. It's only been out for 3 months. And they actually like sent me like $1,000. Oh my God, real money, you know? Whereas I've been I'm used to getting like a $25 where they're selling books for $100 each, and I'm getting like 50 cents a book or something.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's out there. It's available. It's on all of the online resellers, and I think some of your Barnes and Nobles, especially like a college bookstore, is very likely to have it. And it's not 12. I think it's $16.95 if I remember right. But it is the first book that literally is my first book that is priced for humans. All of my other books are priced that not to sell to humans, but to sell to university libraries. Those are the main. They're all priced either university libraries or people who have to buy the book for class. But I don't really so much write textbooks. But they're all priced for that. But this one actually, real human beings, not massive institutions, can afford to buy it. So, and you know, if you still can't afford it, well, contact me. I'll see what I can do.
Well, thank you, Carl. We look forward to seeing you next time, and I look forward to seeing everyone going forward on Imagine More. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jesse. Had a great time. You too, sir.
You guys.
Thank you.
All right, you guys have a great day.